security, Angular security, how we can manage. So what are the security options? We learned about that. And in the security, we configured about what are the options. Whatever we reported about the cross-site scripting attack, all these are vulnerabilities only, na? Vishnu, right? Yeah. It is using predefined services, right? So it is using those predefined functions and services that you yesterday saw. Is it secured URL or not secured URL? Those are all vulnerabilities only, right? Right. So in the securities, so we discussed about how Angular handles the animation and security related options basically. So in that I showed you how the trusted URL, video URL, and the trusted script, cross-site scripting attacks, all these. Another here is about the authorizations actually. Authorization. Technically, authorization is nothing but in general, authorization is the process of restricting access to the resources in application. That means restricting access to the resources in application. So you can configure components so that they are accessible only to the user. So only to the user when authentication is successful. Successful. To the resources only when authentication is successful. Generally, authentication is the process of verifying user credentials, security tokens, security tokens, etc. All these comes under authentication actually. These security tokens and everything are generated at server level, and we are using with the combination. For understanding security tokens and all, you should know server side technologies. So here, Angular is not using any authentication that you can do in your server side technologies. Here, Angular is using authorization. Authentication requires database and verifying the credentials of the user, configuring them using. So authorization is nothing but we can restrict access to the resources. That means user can be restricted in accessing the resources. That is generally possible. So when we define the restriction, like that means you can restrict access to any component by using actually route guards. technically we can restrict access by using route guards. So we have to use route guards. So by using the route guards, we can restrict the access. So actually, it prevents users from navigating 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 to any specific location, that means uh, to any specific location, location location. So without proper authentication. So without proper authentication, right? So actually, we can simply say that it prevents users, right? Yeah. And actually, what you can say that you can secure. So you can secure the route paths. You can secure the route paths. So that means so you can prevent access. Actually, a route guard allows to configure custom logic and functionality. So where we can verify the user credentials and allow or restrict access. That is what actually route guard will do. Authentication, how they can manage. So how you can do that? So actually what you have to do is whenever you generate, so for any component, if you want a restricted access, then you can generate a route guard. So if for any component, if you want restricted access, then you can generate a route guard. That is the important. So according to the requirements, we can configure that. Actually, Angular provides various route guards. Angular provides various route guards depending on the requirements. So we use different route guards. So like the basically different route guards that Angular provides, and the intention, according to the situation, we implement the route guards. So we have like can active. So that is a route guard. Actually, can active activate actually. Can activate is a route guard. And the purpose of this can activate route guard is nothing but it will check whether user can access specific route or not. That means it restricts access to specific route. It restricts access to specific route. So we have can activate child. So that is actually it restricts access. It restricts access to child route. When you are trying to access a child route, it will restrict access to the child route. And we have option like can deactivate. So this generally is used to specify whether he can come out of that route or not. That means it is used to restrict the user to exit the route. Whether user can exit the route or not, that so whether he can come out of that route or he can still stay there, that is decided by using can deactivate. So we have options like resolve resolve. Technically, it is used for used to access data from any API before route activation, and we can use can load and can load. These are all route guard related options. So technically, these are route guard related options. Can load checks so whether the user can route to a module that is lazy loaded. That means it is for lazy routes. So for lazy routes, it is authorizing lazy routes. You can simply say that it is authorizing lazy routes. If you are authorizing ordinary routes, you can use canActive. If you are authorizing lazy routes, then you can use this. Actually, all these functions technically return a Boolean value. That means all these are Boolean. So all the route guards. So technically all route guards can return different types of values. So usually a Boolean value is used to confirm user authentication. So user authentication, that is actually used yes or no, allow or not. And generally route guards are generated generated for every component by using. Technically, we generate route guards for every component by using the command. So we have to use the command generated. You have to use the command ng generate guard and guard name. So any guard name, you have to define the guard name. That is the basic approach, how we can configure and define. So we will see that. So we will see how these are going to work. One simple example. You can use your APIs, you can configure your APIs, you can verify the data. I already showed you a simple option, username, password, verifying the username and password. So from a list of usernames and passwords, one example I showed you when we learned about key up, key down, and iteration like options, we saw that. That is a very simple option here. Let's see how we can manage this, means how we can configure and how to define that. So first, we have to go into the example, and we need to choose the example. So the example is which is already having some routing. In our projects, we already implemented routing in this Flipkart like example. In this Flipkart, so many are there, electronics, footwear, and all these are there. So these all are configured. So let's open this here. So ng saru and the project is equal to, so Flipkart. That is our project where we implemented already routing. We discussed some routing related things, everything there. So here I'm configuring that, and let's run this. And meanwhile, I will create one component here. That means here we are defining a component, and that component is ng generate component as suppose manager home. So some manager home is the component. We are creating some manager home component. Okay, that is the manager home component. We are configuring it. Some import module is there. Acha, so I have to generate into that app folder, right? I will open this app folder. Fine. So ng generate component, and that is manager home and skip test. Fine. So I'm configuring this. So manager home is there. So this is done. And let's check our application successfully running. Okay. So let's open this. So here, so this is the option. So Flipkart. And we have so many details. And here we have electronic footwear, electronics, fashion. So options are defined here. Now I want to add that manager home. So that means I need to configure the manager home in the routing. Then generally what we have to do, already we learned about routing, no need to explain. We need to just go into route module. So routing module here. In the route module, so we have to configure the route for the manager. So here we are configuring the route for the manager. So let's add a path here. We are configuring a path. And this path is for manager. And manager, and which component? The component is manager component. Manager, so home component. Okay. So that is the path configured. So manager home component. And for this manager, we will keep a link for navigation. That means here, I will just go to the app component HTML. In this, we will keep a link for the manager. So as a last list item, so here I'm adding, so anchor router link, so is for manager. Okay, the route name we given as manager, that is the route name. And here I said manager home, okay. And the class as BTN and BTN danger, okay. So, and BTN block, fine. So this is the manager route. Usually when user selects this in the URL, you can see manager home is there at the bottom. I click on manager home at the bottom. It is going to get that manager home and display here. So it is working. You can get at the bottom or in the URL, you can type manager and hit enter. The manager component is accessed. So currently manager component is available to everyone. Anyone who clicks the manager home will come. But I want to restrict. So I want the verify the username and password. And I need to give access. I need to give access only to the authorized people. That means if he is having the role manager or if he having some restriction as manager, only for those people we need to allow. That means we don't want to allow everyone. In that case, generally, what we do is we don't want this route to be accessed to everyone. We need to stop this. Manager home should be restricted. Currently not restricted. Anyone can click, it will come. We want to restrict. So we want to restrict so that others cannot access. Then usually what we do is, so for that, we need to generate a route guard for the manager home. We need to create a route guard for manager home. You can generate the route guard. So ng generate guard and the guard name, suppose manager guard. You can give any name. You can give any name. It doesn't matter. I'm giving the guard name, that is manager guard. Reasonably, I'm defining it. Now, to generate the guard, so this is the guard we are generating. And immediately when you try to generate the guard, it will ask a question. So the question is nothing but, in the guard, which one you want to implement? You can select all of them. You can use up down arrows. You can use a space bar to select and deselect those options. That means according to the situation. Already I told you, can activate means, is this route for allowing access, or is this route for allowing child access? Is this route for coming out? Is it restriction for coming out? Is it restriction for lazy routes? You have to configure depending on the situation. Here we configured. So we configured that. That means we are restricting access that can activate. That means route is activated only when authentication is successful. Manager home can be accessed only when it is successful. In that case, what you can do is, so we can select this can activate and enter. You can add multiple also. Now the route guard is added. Later you can add other options. After generating the guard, you can implement the source here. Route guard, manager guard is generated. When the manager route guard is generated, so what have to happen here generally? So let's go to that location now. Now you can go to the manager route guard location. You see manager route guard is there. Manager guard.ts. So this is the manager route guard. The manager route guard, it is implementing can activate from Angular router. Now here you can see that, so that can activate function is implemented and it is returning true. It is returning true means it is, see here, can activate is a function. This function have two parameters. One is activate route snapshot, route state snapshot. These are some parameters, so which are used, and you see here it is returning so many types of values. It is returning so many types of values. Actually, we want this can activate to return only a Boolean value. So that means we will put Boolean as a return type. That means it need to configure the Boolean value. Now here we need to write the logic, and based on the logic, it will be defined. It will be configured. So if it is returning false, that means we should not allow. If it is returning true, it should allow. That means whatever verification of username, you can inject a service here. In the service, you can get the usernames. We can verify the role of the user, and we can check whether the username is matching with user role is matching with manager. If matching with manager, then allow. We can create a complete UI. For that, you have to use your server-side technology, database, verify from the database. You can write all the logic here. Currently, so you can configure anyway. For example, suppose you have a service to define. Generally, if you want to configure a service and define a service and get the logic from the service and use it. So that means, for example, You can write logic here itself, get the data from service and use it. Suppose we have some data service. In the data service, we have some get products, categories, some service is there in our application. So here I have the option like, so get users. Get users is a service method. And this get user service method is returning some user details. So here name and some John. And here role, some admin. That is the option defined. Here I defined some name, so some name. And here the role, so some manager. And the point is like this, so many people can be there. And people who have the manager role, they can only access that manager home. Others cannot access. That means we need to restrict that. We need to configure that restriction. So then this data service, so in this application, we have to inject this data service into the guard and we have to verify. This is the logic you have to write. So your authentication logic goes here. So that means your authentication logic here. You can get it from API or you can get it from a service anywhere. If it is from a service, then you have to use a constructor. And in the constructor, you have to inject a private and data, and that is from data service. And data service from, this is from Flipkart. So we have two data services. So this is from the Flipkart data service. Okay. That is our data service. Okay. And what we can do is we can get the data and we can return the data. So that means users. That means here we are declaring, so users is an array. And what should happen here is the users array is applied with this dot users. This dot users is applied with this dot users is applied with this dot data dot get users. It will get the list of all users. Or you can directly perform iteration of the users because it is returning an array. You can directly configure that. Now you can check a condition here. So that means we can use a iterator. So for var, so user of users, this dot users. So that means we are conducting an iteration here. So if user dot role, if user role is equal to manager, if user role is manager, then it should return true. It should return true. Otherwise, it should return false. It should return false. That means the user role is matching with the manager role, and then only it will allow the access actually. Actually, this is users. Suppose here I declared another property here. So here I declared another property, user role. So user role. And here the role is applied with some admin. That is the user role admin. But we need to allow only for the user role. That means if user role is matching with that user role, so that means this dot user role. This indicates that, so if any role present inside this users, that role is matching with this role, that means admin. It should allow. But we don't want to allow for everyone. We want to allow only for managers. You can keep it very simple. That means if user role is admin or manager, then only allow it. So if it is manager or admin like roles, then we want to allow. Other roles are not allowed. Or you can make it specific. That means if user role is manager, so that means if it is manager, then only allow. Return true. Otherwise, it should return false. It should return false. So that means what we are saying that in the users list, if role is matching with manager, we don't need this. We can add that if necessary. That means if user role is matching with manager, then allow access. If user role is not matching with manager, then don't allow. That means user role, so there must be manager, then it should allow that. That is the guard, how to configure the guard. This is at high level. Very simple also you can configure. You don't need to do this much actually, simple. Sometimes authentication authorizations also possible. This is how it is done with server side integrations, how we can do with the services, how we can get that and verify from the services. This is the approach actually. And very important is this route guard should be used. So this route guard should be used by our manager route. Manager route have to use this route guard. Then we can manager route guard must be used there. Then what you can do is, so and what is the condition of, if role is matching with manager, then it is allowing, otherwise it is not allowing. So that is the condition it is configured. So technically here, so I go into the routing module. In the manager route, currently anyone can access this component, but it should use a route guard. And you can use the guard name as can active, can activate. And can activate should use which guard? You have to define the route guard name. It can use the route guard name. What is the route guard name? It has to use manager, manager guard. It should use that manager guard. So that means it should use this manager guard. That means now the current manager component is not accessible to everyone. The manager component is accessible only for the people whose role is manager. That verification we generally do here. So usually what happens is, now suppose I click on manager home, it's working because we are allowing for the manager role and there is a manager role. For example, if in the service, if in the service we have developer and admin, only these two people are there here, and I click on here home, home comes footwear, search, all these are working. I click on manager home and it's not working actually. So I click on manager home, it's not working. So you can do one more thing. So if anyone tries to access manager, then we can ask him to log in and verify as manager. Then we can allow him access. These all server side integrations done, verifying username, passwords and all. As of now, just we restricted it. Anyone tries here from, so manager tries to access manager route, it is not available. That means no one can access the manager route. It's not showing. Why? Because there is no manager role person here. So that is the reason. So it is not allowing. You can verify individually. You can verify individually, like username is this, password is this, then allow. So you can check every concept individually. That means we can verify. For that, we need to have the data in a proper way. If username is this and password is this, then we can allow. We can write that. Now see if there is a manager role person available. So currently footwear, fashion working, but manager is not working. So then what we do is in the service, we keep a role called manager. So a manager role person is there. Okay, now the role is matching with that. Then usually when you click on this manager home, that manager will come and display. I'm just verifying one role in the list. You can verify anything. You can verify the passwords. You can verify the username. There are several things for authentication to use. So currently I'm accessing from server, I'm accessing and using it. Actually, in the service, you have name and you have role. So you have some like password. So password is some admin 1 2, and we have password like manager mg12, like this mng12 something. So the point is I need to verify username and password matching or not. If username and password are matching, then allow the access. Then usually what we can do is, so route guard is being used for it. In the route guard, we need to change the logic here. We have to get every username. And here we can have some details like, so public username. So we are asking is username. Username is suppose John. Fine. And we are having, so this is the username and David is manager. Okay. So here I said David and we are asking password. So password, and password is suppose mng 1234. Wrong password is there. Now I have to verify the password he entered. So and the password in the user details, both username and password are matching. That means we have to write a condition. If user dot name, if user dot name is matching with this dot username, if it is matching with username, and if user dot pwd password is matching with this dot password, if both are matching, then only return true. Return true. Then only return true. We need to configure that. Then only return true. Otherwise, return false. We say return false. If username and password are matching, then return true. So password is not matching, username is matching. So that means the username in the database and password we are verifying. So username is matching, but password is not matching. Password is something different because password we are expecting 12 mng12. It is 1ng123. Now, can manager route can be accessed by this David person. You can see here, I click on manager home. It's not working. It is unable to access because it is not matching. Then I change this username as 12. That is what we are expecting. Username is correctly provided. Then you can see now, once username is correctly provided, I click on manager home. It's working now. That means we are verifying the username passwords. And if username password both are correct, then we are giving access to it. If username password is not correct, that means if he is not logging in at all, then what we can do is we can do one more work also. What we can do is we learned routing. We learned about all points about routing. So what we can do is we can simply redirect the user. If it is not matching, we can simply redirect the user to any another location. That means here we can redirect the user to any another location. Suppose here it is returning true. So else what should happen? Else what should happen? So if username and password are not matching, then I can take him to login screen. That is what generally we do. We will say that please log in again. Means we will verify that and we will simply take him to login screen. And in the login screen, usually we will handle that details. Then how to navigate automatically? Already you know how to navigate automatically. To navigate automatically, so you need another module. So another option, private. You can create a router. We can import router. And you know, so this router need to be imported and used here. And this is in the Angular router. So we have to import a router module. We have to import a router module. We have to configure that router. And you know that once you have that router, so you have the router. So router is there inside this constructor. Through router, we can navigate. So you know how to navigate. So how do we navigate? We can say this dot router dot navigate. Navigate to which path? So suppose I want to navigate to login path. I need to navigate to login path. That means it should navigate to login path if username and password are not matching. So that means it should not show an empty screen. It should navigate to login path and say that now provide proper login and come. That means now generally what we do is here in this routing TS file, you see in the routing TS file, so there is a login which is accessing the login component, which is accessing login. We already have a login page. Now we said that in the logic, if the username password not matching, then return. If it is matching, return true. Otherwise, navigate him to this location. Navigate him to this location. This is the approach we are configuring. Navigate him to that location. That is the option we are defining. Usually see here, home, I said footwear or some search, all these are working. I click on manager home. Actually, the credentials are not matching or credentials are matching. So then if it is not matching, then usually what it will do is it should get on manager home login screen. It should get me to the login screen. It will not get the manager home. If it is matching, then it will directly get the manager home. Generally what you do, you enter the username and password and login. When username password is entered and click login, these details are supplied into these variables. I hope you know that. Those details are supplied into those variables and those are verified here. And we are verifying whether those details entered in the form are matching with the details defined, So if they are matching with the details defined, then we are giving access. Otherwise, we are redirecting to the login screen. This is a very regular approach how we can follow. Actually, so we are navigating to that login and usually so it is returning false. Suppose I say return false. So we are returning the false here and we are not configuring the return false outside. That means whether it has to return true or it has to return false. So because it should navigate to login and it should not allow to access that location. That means I said on the search or manager home, it should navigate to that login. If username password are correct, then it should allow access. That means if it is matching, then it should allow access and get access to that. So that means when user selects on this, so footwear, fashion and manager home, it should get that. So that means here we need to change the logic now. That means actually return false. It should not return false here because it will navigate to login. It should allow login navigation. That is the reason we have to write outside here. Why? Because here it should not return false. So what it should do is submitted and then it will collect your details, verify the details. When it will restrict here, so it will restrict in this location, right? That means, so why you are returning the false here, not in the else? Because after this, it should not stop. It should continue the route. So it should continue the route, configure the route because they have to submit the values and define the values. So technically, so this is all done with server side integration. That means we use service, we get the data from the users. Generally, you have to learn one point. So this route guard, if it is returning true, then it is allowing. If it is returning false, it's not allowing. Then whether to return true or to return false. So we need to check that. Whether to return true or false, we need to check based on condition. Equal to username. Password is not equal to username. Then navigate to login. Else return true. You can define anyway, right? There are various technique of configuring this. What is the main intention of this? The main intention is nothing but we are restricting access. We are restricting access. We can simply use the authentications. Usually authentication and authorization are different, that you will learn generally in server side techniques and all. Authorization is restricting access. So Angular is nothing having related to authentication. And authentication is not in Angular. Authentication is just verifying the credentials that you can do anywhere. This is authorization, not authentication. You should know that route guards are not for authentication. They are for authorization. Authorization, usually you need an authorization to pass authorization. You need authentication. Authentication means verifying the credentials, user ID, password, all this comes under that category. So it depends on you access from the service, you verify the details, you submit from a form, collect the details and verify. You can use all your redirection navigation techniques that you have learned here. That is general purpose of the route guards and how the route options work. This is one point about the security, means authorizations, how you can manage. So in this example, so technically in this example for authentication and authorization. So what's the example we have tried here is we just done one option is go to your project. So project enabled with routing, because already we have created so many projects and enabled with routing. Now simply we add a new component, and that component is ng generate component, that is a manager. So manager home, that is the component. After generating the component, we need to generate a guard for that component. So home, okay. We need to generate a guard for that component. So we have to define, so generate a guard for component. And that is nothing but, so here we have done in this way. So ng generate guard and manager guard like this. We configured that guard. And in this manager guard, so we are defining some logic. So we are configuring that logic. And the logic for that manager guard, that means what's the logic we have defined here is this is. So that is a simple logic, manager guard.guard.ts. So manager guard.guard.ts. In this manager guard, so we are configuring this logic. So we are accessing the data from a service, we are configuring the data from service and using it. And you can maintain data in data service.ts for verification of these details. You can maintain data in data service. You can just, in the data service, I am just giving a method which we are using. Service method, what we are using, get users is the service method. And we have to go to, so router.module, right? So app router module, app router.module.ts. We have to go to app router module.ts. And so in this, we need to just configure the manager route with this route guard. We need to configure that with the route guard. So this is the configuration for the route guard we define. That is only the point we have to use. So app routing.module.ts, we need to define the route guard. So this will restrict the user. That means you here what we have to do is try changing the username and password. So if it is mismatching, so it will restrict. The same thing, you can write any level logic here. I have suppose another component, suppose some admin card is there. If username and password is not matching, then return false. So, and true. We can use verifying the passwords. So we can verify the username and passwords just for our different understanding sake. That means you can write anyway. That means it has to verify. That means generally user can check in anyway. Suppose I am writing like if username is not equal to username and password is not equal to password. So then what should happen? Then what should happen here? Just it has to navigate to this location and it should say return. So it return false. It should return false. Login and return false. You don't need any else so to configure here. So just you have to define it and it should return true if it is matching. So that is how you configure. There are various techniques of writing. So depending on your requirement, you can configure anyway. So this is general logic, right? How you define in the route, how you configure the logic. So you can define in this way, right? So, or you can configure in this way. So just, so, or the condition is defined in this way. So, or you can just verify the username and password and you can handle that. Technically, we are restricting the users. We are restricting the users from accessing the resources. So that is what actually route guards can do, configuring of route guards and defining, right? Right. So we have, those are not route guards. So those are third party plugins, right? Those are third party extensions like CAPTCHA. So that is called open authentication, not route guards. Okay. You should first know the difference between them. They are called open authentications. Google login, all these are open authentication. They are separate APIs that you have to implement. If you have to implement a Google login, if you want to implement a Facebook login, your server side technologies will teach you how do we integrate. So by using APIs, that is called open authentication. Open authentication, that is not authorization, right? That comes under authentication, not authorization. So that is the reason I told you that first you should know the difference between authorization and authentication. So Google login, Facebook login, that is not authorization, that is authentication. Authorization, authorization can be done through any authentication. It can be Google authentication or it can be the Google, Facebook authentications are called third party, right? That is authentication, not authorization. Here route guard is not authentication. I already told you. This is related to authorization. This is actually related to authorization, not authentication, right? Now, here the concept is, that is how we restrict the accessibilities. So verifying the user's credentials and everything. Now, another important, after understanding this, one more option here we need to know, this is all the authentication and authorizations, generally how they do. And one more concept here we need to understand is about yes. So see, authentication related, anything you don't do here, na, everything you do in a service. I hope you know that, right? In a service only you do everything. Here just you are authorizing. Finally, you are using the credentials result what it is. You can verify the token returned by your authentication, or you can verify the username and password returned by your authentication. I hope you understood that, right? So authentication related options will never be here in Angular. First point, you know that, no? Right? That means client side authentications will not be there. Your application is verified with the credentials server side, na? Am I right? Client side authentication is what just a pop-up dialog box will come. You are verifying in the browser. I hope you are clear with that, Vishnu, right? Right, because when you talk about authentication in an application, that is always server side only. We are talking about verifying credentials tokens from database, na? Sessions and all, right? That means it comes under, yeah, these all under server side only. Client side, you are doing nothing. Client side, what you are doing is you are just accessing the value. That means the token value or the token value returned to you, or the cookie value that is returned to you, or the just authentication user ID password that is returned to you. Everything is designed in server side, right? Authentications and all, OAuths, open auth, right? So this is the basic how we can handle the securities in Angular, how we can configure the security in Angular. One more important and the topic we have, that is about unit testing. So unit testing is a very big concept. I'm not teaching you testing tools here, but so basics of unit testing. That means how testing is done for Angular application. Because for that you need to learn a separate framework for performing unit testing in any company, right? So we will see how Angular uses some integrated framework, how unit tests are created, configured. Because if you learn those testing frameworks, then you can integrate those testing frameworks and deal with those frameworks here. How unit testing is done in Angular, how we can do that. And so how we can build and deploy. That means a simple application option about so building and deploying. So this two parts. So we will discuss in tomorrow's session, right? Tomorrow we will have a session, and with tomorrow's session we will end all the concepts of Angular, right? These two topics will be there, and from tomorrow we will finish these two options. Then so it will be done with our Angular sessions. Tomorrow will be the last, and tomorrow, so the timing, so is it okay with 8 a.m. tomorrow? 8 a.m. tomorrow. Right? Yes. So